Hi, this is James from Tabletop Gaming Guild, and today we're going to talk about the board game Euphoria, Build a Better Dystopia. This is designed by Jamie Steckmeyer and Alan Stone. It is a 2 to 6 player game that plays around 60 minutes. So let's go down to the table, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of how the game plays, and we'll come back and I'll give you my final thoughts.
Okay, so this is what an initial setup of Euphoria Build a Better Dystopia might look like. Now, a couple things I wanted to point out is I only put out enough pieces for 1 player, but the game's set up for 6. Also, if you're playing with less players, you're going to put some of these out on each of these star locations, and what these do is they're going to block off some of the places where you can place stars, which I'll explain in a second, based on your player count. So keep that in mind, that if you're playing with less than 6 players, you have less places to place your stars at each of these locations. In addition, you will shuffle out and place 6 market tiles. Now, there's a lot of market tiles come with the game, and they have some really cool theming to them that I like a lot, and so there's a lot of variety just in these guys, but to start out, you'll put 6 of them out. Also, I have 1 thing of resources out, and there actually comes with 2 trays, so just be aware there's a lot more resources than I have showing on the table. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to go a brief overview of the game. This isn't like a complete rules setup, but just give you an idea how the game plays. Now, to start out the game, you're going to get 10 of these stars, and the goal in the game is to place out all 10 of your stars so you can win. The game immediately ends when that occurs. Sometimes there can be ties when these guys flip and stars come out, or different situations, and there's some tiebreakers for them. They're in the rule book, but in general, the person who placed their last or 10th star is going to win. The game also comes with this really cool resource multiplier, which I think every game should have, so that you could just put out one of these on the third, so it shows you have 3, but if you have 6, you just put 2 on here. So it's nice because you never, ever, ever run out of resources with this. Although, I'm not sure I would run out of resources normally, but it's really nice not to have a giant pile of resources. You just move the thing up and down on this little track here to show what you got. You also get 2 dice that start with the game, and these dice are your workers. And you have 2 dice that aren't available to you yet that get put out here in your worker activation tank that you can acquire those workers later on. You will also get an ethical dilemma card that is a secret to you. So this randomly goes out. And with these ethical dilemmas, on your turn as an action, you get 1 action on your turn. You can use this as your action. You can solve your ethical dilemma. So you can either help your friend escape, and you get to draw 2 recruits and keep 1, which I'll show you how that's important. Or you can place a star on this card, so you can get closer to winning. Now you can either use this item, which I'll show you how to get items, or 2 cards. So that's basically how your ethical dilemmas work. It's just a secret objective for you to either get another star out or get another recruit. And I'll explain the importance of the recruits in a second. And to start out the game, you're going to get to pick from 4 recruits. Now, all these recruits have different abilities. And when you're going to pick the 2 recruits you're going to start the game with, you're going to pick one to be face up and one to be face down. Now, the importance of these recruits is that when they're faced up, you get to use certain areas of the board and you get certain benefits. Now, when the worker, well, I'll go over each of the spaces, and I'll explain the benefits here in a second, but just know that these are all, can be all some of the different factions. You can double up some of the factions. You can, however you want to play, because you do get these abilities. So you're going to select 2. So we'll just select these 2. You're going to, like I said, you're going to put 1 face up and 1 face down in your player area. So let's make a little room here. And in my player area, I'll have those. And then here's my ethical dilemma that no one knows what it is. And the other 2 get put back. Now, after everyone's selected those, the only way that you can get more workers is by solving your ethical dilemma. So at the max in the game you can have is 3 of these workers. So keep that in mind. So you won't be able to have a worker for all 4 factions that are on the board. Now, when on your turn, you're going to look at a couple different things. You're going to look at this board right here, and the number of hearts that you have on there is the number of cards that you can have in your hand at any time. If you ever have more than that, you have to discard down. Or if that gets reduced, you discard down. Also, here's a knowledge track, and this is how much you add to the roll of your workers. And this is one of the neatest mechanisms in the game because these dice are your workers. And on your turn, you're going to roll them, and you're going to count up the pips. And like here's 4, and I'd add that to this 3, and it'd be 7. What you don't want to have is roll 16 or higher, because if you do, the smartest worker, which is going to be the one with the highest number on the die, runs away. So it goes back over to this worker activation pool because he has become too smart and realized he's in a dystopia, or she. So after you roll your dice, you're going to take turns placing them out. You can place one at a time. Now there's an exception on a turn. You only get one action, but if you roll doubles, like you saw I rolled the 2 2s, you're able to place both of these dice out on your turn. And that can be super helpful for a couple different reasons. But we're going to go over what happens if you go to each of these spaces. So in each of these spaces, the part with the gray is what you have to pay, and this part is what you get. So in this space here, I'd have to pay 3 of these item cards to get a star, which will go over here, and you can only do that if there's spaces available at that location, and you get to push the faction forward. And we'll go over what happens when you push the faction forward, but for now, just know that this gets moved forward 1. Places like here, there's 2 different types of resources. There's an advanced resources, which is going to be your bricks, gold, or stone. And your normal resources are going to be your electric, your, this is Euphoria, water, or is that bliss? Sorry, maybe that's bliss. This is going to be water, and this is fruit, or food. So you have your basic and you have your advanced. For this one here, you'd have to turn in 3 advanced resources, and you would then move your faction forward for this faction, and you would get to place a star. The space beside it, you can do any one basic resource and a bliss, and then you move the faction forward and you get 2 cards. And this will continue out throughout the board, but you have all these spaces to put on here. Now keep in mind that if you're on these spaces, you don't actually block your opponent from using that space. If your opponent uses that space, or yourself, you actually will bump the worker off. It'll come back to that person and they immediately re-roll it. And then they get to place that on their turn. And that's really important because of a reason you're going to see shortly. Now you'll notice that each of these have a place for 1 die, but some of these have these big open areas. And each of the factions have one of these open areas. And what this open area is any number of people can place stuff in here. But when you place things in here, and we'll get another faction's die here, you look at the number that's the total. So let's say that person already placed, they would have actually been 3, so they would have got here. Now if I place by 4 here, I actually place here. And what will happen here, whoops, 7, yeah, here, I would get a bliss, but then I would also lose a knowledge, so which is very good because that is, again, what gets added to your roll to determine whether you roll 16 or less and lose a worker. But if I get higher up here, 9, I will get 2 bliss, which is really good, but I gain a knowledge. So, and each of these are actually identical for their type of resources. Like you get bliss here, you'll get fruit here, you'll get water, and over here, you'll get electricity. So those are all the same. Those are like the pools that you could put your workers. And each of the factions have places where you can place individual workers, and these ones have tunnels. So I will note that this guy, this faction up here is the most unique. It has the most places that pushes its faction forward. If you look at the Wastelander territory here, the way that you're going to push your faction forward is going to be through this slot right here. Now, in addition to giving, because there's market tiles in these locations, in addition to giving these benefits here, you can also remove the debuff that you're going to see from these market tiles, and I'll explain that guy in a second. So with the market tiles, what you need to do is you need to have 3 of these resources covered, but they don't need to all be you. So if you have these resources, you could put your worker here, okay? And even another one on another turn, if you want to. And once you have 3 of these filled in, this tile is going to flip. Now, important to notice that if you recall your worker before this is finished, it doesn't count. When this flips, this market tile here, you get to put your star on it for everyone that had a worker here. So that's nice. You get rid of a star, and you can use this space for its benefit. Now, and the benefit is actually, when you do it, it'll actually move over, and this is what you have to spend, and this is your benefit here. Now, everyone else gets a penalty for not helping with this. So this one says every time you roll a 4, you lose a regular resource or advanced resource. So when on your turn, when you roll a 4, you're going to lose something, which is bad. So we completed this. You're going to put your stars on here to note that you did it, and we'll put the green star on. I don't have it with me right now, but you put that on there, so you know that have it. And then everyone that doesn't, of course, gets the debuff, and you get that space to use. However, if you put your die here and you spend this, you can actually put your star here and not worry about that debuff. Now, that's the market tiles, and like I said, there's 6 of them throughout the game. Now, you'll notice that this place had a place to push its faction all the time. This place only really has a couple places that you can push your faction forward. You're going to have this location where you can push your faction forward and place a star here. You have where is it? There's one more place. Maybe that's it. Yeah, that's oh yeah, sorry, right here. That was the other place. So yeah, in the multi places where you can put your multiple workers and you add these up, you also have the first column lets you push your faction forward. And that's similar for all the other factions except for this one. So it's harder to push these factions forward. Now we'll get into, I'll explain the tunnels real quick, and then I'll explain what this does. So the tunnels, when you place things here, you pay the resource, and then you gain this or this, and then this guy goes forward. Once this guy gets to this portion of the track, you notice it has this little picture right here. What that means is everyone with this faction's worker that is face down gets to flip it face up, which is not that faction, but it's still the point. And now that worker's active, and you get its benefit. If you get to the end of the tunnel, you'll get to remove this block, and everyone that has a worker in that faction can now use this benefit, which is really nice because this one gives 3 energy, this one gives 3 water, this one gives 3 fruit. So that is basically how you're going to tunnel. And go to the factions now. The point of these guys is when you get to this point in here, and different points in here, you're going to get different bonuses. So when you get to these points right here, you're going to be able to get both of these resources if you have a worker in that group. If you get to here, everyone gets to flip a worker that's in that faction. If you get to the end, right down here, everyone gets to put a star on every single worker that they have that is part of that faction. So it's really good. Now, the last thing you can do, or 2 last things you can do on your turn. You can get another worker, and you can simply put your die there, and you're going to pay its cost on the left, either water or energy, depending where you put it, and you get the benefit. Here you'll get 2 more hearts, which will increase your hand size that you can have. Here you'll lose 2 knowledge and gain a worker die. The worker die, when you gain it, you immediately roll it, and then you can place it out on your next turn. So now we're going to get into recalling your workers. So, and another thing to mention is when you get to these 3 spots where you have to trade in 3 cards, it has a little handy key over here. You could actually trade in 2 identical items to get it. And there's several places on the board that let you do it. Like this, here's the symbol to gain a card. So there's a couple places to get the cards. That one lets you get 2. So also keep in mind that your hearts are going to control how many you can have in your hand. So keep that in mind. It's a very powerful resource. It's really good. But you got to work on that to get it up. One of the ways you could do it is when you recall your worker or workers. You don't have to recall all your workers on the board. You can recall as many as you want. You may not want to if you have a worker on a market tile. You might want to recall your others, but as soon as you recall all your workers, you're going to roll them, and you're going to hope to not get that 16 or higher. When you recall them, you can spend a fruit or a bliss. If you do, you're going to gain 2 hearts, which will increase your hand size. If you do not, you are going to lose a heart, which is going to decrease your hand size. So this is important to remember throughout the game. And you can go a long time without recalling workers if you plan and you work and you do things that other opponents might bump your worker for. You can keep on going, or you pick another worker up. There's different ways that you can push how long it goes until you have to return those workers. So that's basically all you could do in the game. Euphoria is a worker placement race game. So again, the point of the game is to get rid of all these stars. The way you're going to get rid of all your stars again is you can place your stars in the faction if you use the space that lets you do it. You can place your stars on these market tiles, and you can also get rid of stars on your workers when you push the faction all the way to the end. So that's the game in the nutshell. Let's go ahead back up to the table here, and I'll give you my final thoughts on the game Euphoria.
So Euphoria, build a better dystopia. This is an awesome game. I love it. It is one of my favorite worker placement games. It's actually going to, probably with a couple more plays, be in my top 10. This game is amazing. There's so many things you have to think about during the game, but yet it's so easy to teach. It's very easy to get the concepts down, but there's a lot of meaningful decisions you need to make, and it's an efficiency game and a race. So amazing. I love rolling the dice, and the dice are actually your workers, and the knowledge and level of your workers is what you roll is amazing. It gives a lot of strategy in the game of deciding, like, how many dice do I want to recall right now? Do I want to recall all of them? Do I want to risk having one run away? Do I want to, because of that, and when I recruit a new die, do I want to put that on one of the market tiles, even though it might not get finished, but it's going to be there and I locked it in, but I can just recall the other 2. And when you recall them, are you going to spend the fruits to up your hearts on the game? So am I going to do that? Is that going to be a thing that I need to pay attention to? Or am I going to take the penalty? So there's a lot to think about. Like, when I do that and I raise that, do I then need to have more cards in my hand? Is that a strategy I'm going to take? There's a ton to think about. I really like how the market tiles causes detriments to all other players that didn't invest in building. So there's a lot of strategy in when you start trying to build a market tile. And when you do that, you may look at your other players and be like, well, I know that 2 of my other players don't have the resources, but 1 does, and it's in their best interest to do it. So you use a lot of talk throughout the game. There's a lot of engagement throughout the game because you're really paying attention to what our players are doing, because other players will benefit you on your turn. So if you're actually pushing a faction forward, that can benefit you. So you may want to try to coerce people into certain areas, being like, well, I'll put my worker here and we'll get some resources and you can bump me out. So, and then I'll bump you out. So there's a lot to this game. And I like how it ramps up at the end, because in general, everyone's stars are getting placed out there. People are getting very close to their 10th star. So there's a lot of good stress towards the end of the game. This game is just, I don't know, it's just amazing. It is a lot of fun. I highly recommend that if you like worker placement games, that you check this out. And unlike other worker placement games, I really like the fact that through rounds you don't have to do board setup. So that is great, where all the turns are fluid. So there's no real like rounds. It just goes. It's nice. So I would definitely recommend Euphoria: Build a Better Dystopia. Thank you for watching.